Hello and welcome. It is a pleasure to be here at the A4S 2020 Summit. Thank you so much for joining us here today. So my name is Emily. I am the project manager for our finance initiative at the MacArthur Foundation, and I will be your host for the next 45 minutes or so. So the MacArthur Foundation is a UK-based charity which was founded 10 years ago by the world record-breaking sailor Dame MacArthur. Our aim is to accelerate the transition to a circular economy, so transition away from a take, make, waste economy to one that is regenerative by design. This is an approach to economic development that tackles some of the biggest challenges of our time, such as waste, pollution and climate change, as well as offering a better outcome for businesses, society and the environment. We work with over 300 businesses across industries, including from plastics, fashion, food and finance, as well as with policymakers and academics. In this session, we'll be discussing the topics of financing and measuring the circular economy, two interlinked and important topics. To help me with this, I'm joined by my colleagues Jarko Havas and Michiel de Smet, who lead our programs on data metrics and finance at the Foundation. But this session is also about you, the audience, and we want to make it interactive. So I encourage you to put your questions to our panelists in the chat, the Q&A box, and I will put them to Michiel and Jarko later in the session. We'll also be throwing some polls at you throughout the session, so to keep you on your toes and understand a bit more about what you know already. So I wanted to kick off with a poll, and the first one is to find out whether you have said the word circular economy out loud more than once in the last 3 months. Yes or no? Great, we'll see the results coming in. Right, so actually 2/3 of the audience have said circular economy out loud, so that's really great to see. For the benefit of those who are perhaps less familiar with the topic, Michiel, can you share a little bit about how we think about this? Michiel, we haven't got your video at the moment. There we go.
Yes, Emily, happy to do so. I think in order to explain the circular economy, let's take a classic example of the linear economy. And let's take the example of a light bulb. About a century ago, light bulb manufacturers had become so good at producing light bulbs that they worried that people wouldn't have to buy new light bulbs any longer. And actually rightly so, because still nowadays we've got light bulbs which are over 100 years old and are still working nowadays. So what did they do? Leading light bulb manufacturers came together and decided to limit lamp life. So essentially they were designing in waste. Waste is not just a byproduct of a process, it actually is essential to the industry's business model. And that's a clear example of what we call a linear model, a linear industry. It's about taking resources out of the ground, making something out of it, and then after using it for longer or shorter period of time, throwing it away. Take, make, waste. Hence a linear economy, a line. However, there are signs that we're moving away from such a linear model, which often has severe drawbacks, whether that's economic drawbacks, environmental or social shortcomings. And there are signs that we're moving in the right directions. One of those leading light bulb manufacturers, Philips, is actually currently offering a pay-per-lux lighting system in Amsterdam's Schiphol airport. In this setup, the airport is no longer buying light bulbs or lighting fixtures, but it actually is just paying for the light that it emits. In this setup, Philips remains the owner of the light bulbs or the fixtures, the installations, and as such, it also is responsible for the performance, the maintenance, and it will take care of the reuse and recycling of those fixtures after their first useful life. In this setup, the dynamics change and the incentive system change, and it really is a win-win for both Philips and the airport.
Because it really demonstrates this new way of thinking which benefits all parties. But how can we generalize this and apply it across all different sectors of the economy and across both the private and the public sector?
Well, taking a step back, the circular economy aims to redefine growth focusing on society-wide benefits. In a nutshell, it is based on 3 principles. First of all, it's about designing out waste and pollution. Second, it's about keeping products and materials within our economy. And third, it's about regenerating natural systems. And all of this is underpinned by transition to its renewable energy sources. So in practice, you might know the circular economy through product redesign for durability, repairability. You might know it through resale and sharing platforms, whether that's fashion or cars. There's material innovation, there's remanufacturing, regenerative farming. So a range of very concrete practices that are already happening today, which are very circular in essence. So as we saw from the Philips example, this is happening, the transition is happening. We see increasingly companies and governments alike adopting circular economy principles for many reasons. So that can go from creating and tapping into new markets. It could be for resource productivity and cost saving purposes. It could also be for job creation or environmental objectives. Examples of companies include some of the world's well-known large companies like Unilever, Danone, Renault. And if you look at governments, that goes from the highest levels, such as the European Commission and the Chinese government, but also includes cities like London, New York, and Sao Paulo. So for us, it's very encouraging to see how the idea is being picked up and being implemented at an ever-increasing pace.
That's great. So we know we want to talk about finance as one of the key topics of this session. I think a question many of our audience might be asking is, where does finance come into this? How do you apply the principles of the circular economy? What's their role? What are the opportunities?
Yeah, very good question, obviously. At the foundation, we've been looking into this question for nearly a year now, and we've brought together our insights in a paper that we launched last September. I'm actually very grateful for the foreword that has kindly been provided by HRH, the Prince of Wales, and also for the endorsements of BlackRock Chairman and CEO Larry Fink, as well as other 30 other CEOs and senior executives from investors and banks across the financial services sector. So that paper has been launched then, and it has a few key findings. I think first and foremost, it explains how the circular economy offers a massive opportunity to the financial sector, as it will help them deliver on goals related to climate change and ESG, so environmental, social, and governance. And at the same time, it goes beyond, as it acts as a new source of better growth. Secondly, the paper shows how the market, the circular economy market, is taking off. In the past 18 to 24 months, we've seen a steep growth in financing activity across asset classes dedicated to the circular economy. And then thirdly, the paper calls upon the finance sector to build on this initial momentum and scale the circular economy, which will require both private sector and public sector action.
Great, and it's really great to see that the finance sector is already seeing seizing these opportunities, and that growth is happening. So I wanted to make a quick reminder to everyone in the audience to drop your questions for Michiel and Jarko on anything that they're talking about in the chat, or just generally what you want to know about the topics of finance and measurement as it relates to circular economy. And then I want to talk about how we're seeing this transition happening across sectors of the economy, and even whole industries being disrupted. Like, for example, we're seeing this in plastic packaging industry. And this is creating both opportunities for those who are leading the change, but also risks for those that are lagging. So I wanted to find out in my next poll how much you've already thought about this within your organisation. So have you thought about how the circular economy transition impacts your company's strategy and risk assessment? And it goes from having never considered it to having integrated it into strategy and risk assessment processes. Again, a range of answers coming through. So I think it's sort of most people are more down towards the never considered or thought about it but not taken any action side of things, but already some who have started to implement and already integrated into strategy and risk assessment processes, which is great to see. And I think, well, wherever you are in your journey, we believe it's crucial to have a way to measure progress towards a circular economy at an individual company level. Because as the old adage goes, what is measured can be managed. Jarkko, I want to turn to you now. I wanted to, if you can tell us a little bit more about the tool that EMF has developed to help companies measure how circular they are.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things indeed that we measure with this tool is whether circular economy has found its way into a company's strategy and just assessing generally risks for the business on a company level. Before going into more detail on what we actually measure with it, just a brief note on why it's important. We talked about the benefits and opportunities that circular economy can offer to financial institutions and of course companies in the real economy. And we see that the implementation is happening. Some of the big brands Michiel mentioned are taking circular economy and acting on it. And when you get to that stage, you need to be able to measure how well you're doing. Being able to measure gives you a benchmark today and ability to track your progress towards that future that you've laid out in your strategy for your circular economy aspirations. And that's why we need a tool that holistically measures a company's progress towards that aspiration of being circular. And our tool, Circulytics, that we launched in January this year and now updated into version 2 last month, actually almost 2 months ago now, does exactly that. So we've had soon 800 companies signing up to using that tool to measure everything from whether circular economy is part of your strategy and risk assessment to what do your material flows look like, or if you're a financial institution, whether you're positively screening for circular economy for your financial products and how much money is actually flowing to support that real economy with circular economy. As an extension sort of to that, it's important, of course, that circular economy measurement also finds its way into this broader non-financial accounting standards. And what we've seen in the past 12 months is that many initiatives have popped up, especially in Europe and North America, in trying to standardize ESG metrics and sort of the broader environmental metrics and ways to do accounting and reporting, including often, of course, climate mitigation as one of those aspects. And we've also shown last year in our paper that circular economy and the embedded emissions in products are a big portion of how to solve the climate problem. And therefore, circular economy, we think, is very important to have as a part of those standards. And what we're doing as well, especially next year, is to make sure that our learnings from developing Circulytics, the method to measure circular economy performance for companies, parts of it and key indicators find their way into these accounting standards as well. So in that sense, it's a very timely topic, and we are working very closely with as much as we can to make sure the circular economy is part of these standards.
Great, and we'll come back a bit more to those non-financial reporting standards later. And you also just touched there upon the link to climate change, and I wanted to kind of come out with the relative detail of talking about measuring circular economy at a company level and thinking about circular economy as this much bigger idea. As you just mentioned, circular economy is a means to tackle the root causes of climate change and other global challenges like biodiversity loss. And before I dive into this a bit more, I wanted to first ask the audience another poll question to see if you know what percentage of greenhouse gas emissions, and this comes from the paper Jarkko talked about, can be addressed by the energy transition alone. So that is the transition to renewable energy and energy efficiency measures. So it's a choice between 25%, 55% and 85%.
Seems like some people have read the paper.
Yeah. Can just cue the results now. Brilliant. Yeah, as Jarkko says, it seems like a few people have read the paper. So, Michiel, can you tell us which is the right answer and why this is relevant for circular economy?
Yeah, happy to. And indeed, the majority is right. It is 55%. So if you take a step back, if you want to achieve our global climate change objectives, we can address 55% of global greenhouse gas emissions through the energy transition. And as Emily said, it is about moving towards renewable energy sources, that is about energy efficiency. However, to achieve those goals, we'll also have to deal with the remaining 45% of those emissions. And that has to do with how we produce and use products and how we grow and consume food in our society. So that very much is about transforming consumption and production systems. And that's exactly where the circular economy comes into play. To give you an example, by circulating products instead of producing new ones, we can reduce our energy demand by maintaining the energy that went into making them. Or looking at agriculture, by adopting circular practices, we can sequester carbon within our soil through regenerative farming. So the circular economy really is a vital part of the solution to climate change.
Yep, so circular economy can bring these solutions which are urgently needed and people are calling for, but is the finance world paying attention? So Michiel told us earlier that the circular economy financing market is taking off. So I also wanted to test you to understand if you know, to get an idea of whether you already know what's happening out there in the market. So the question I wanted to put to you was, how many public equity funds dedicated to the circular economy are there? And this can be, so when I'm talking about public equity funds, I'm talking about investment vehicles that invest in publicly listed companies which are focused on the circular economy, either solely or maybe it's one of the core themes they invest in. Okay, so in this time, we would love to see that it was 20 or more, but the actual answer is there are at least 14 funds that we're aware of that have a sole or partial focus on investing in companies which are accelerating the transition to a circular economy. And what's interesting is that the majority of these have been launched in the last 2 years alone, showing how fast this topic is climbing up the agenda. I just wanted to also remind everyone again, it was great to see we've got some questions coming in. Make sure you keep asking questions in the chat so we can actually ask the questions that you want to know about to Michiel and Jarkko. So as more and more of these types of funds start to emerge, as well as other financing and investment activities, it's important that there's a common language and common definitions for circular economy used by both companies and financiers. And that circular economy principles are adequately integrated in both financial and non-financial reporting and disclosure. So Jarkko talked a bit about this earlier. But we're seeing the momentum at the moment to harmonise and align non-financial reporting standards. Michiel, what do you see happening, and how is circular economy already integrated in these efforts? And then Jarkko, where does circulytics fit into this? Michiel, we'll start with you.
Yeah, great. I'm sorry, the line broke up for a second. So it has indeed been a very busy year when it comes to measurement and disclosure activity, and I'll share a few headlines, but bear with me, there are plenty of acronyms here. So I think, first of all, it's worth noting the alignment discussions, the calls for harmonization, most notably by some of the leading reporting organizations such as CDP, CDSB, GRI, IRC, and SASB, and they actually published a joint statement of intent on this. So that's definitely one. We are also increasingly seeing asks to make TCFD mandatory, so moving beyond the voluntary industry initiative it currently is. Then there's the World Economic Forum and the International Business Council, which are working towards common metrics and consistent reporting, and they actually published a report on this a few weeks ago. There's the IFRS Foundation, which currently is going through a consultation round and understanding the role they should be playing here in standard setting. And then obviously there's the European Union work that has a few different aspects. There's the non-financial reporting directive, there's the sustainable finance disclosure regulation, and also, well, there's the taxonomy regulation. And circular economy is, when we look at all those initiatives, circular economy is integrated to varying extent, really. So in some of those initiatives, like the EU taxonomy, it has a clear role to play. For example, in that initiative or that regulation, circular economy is one of the 6 environmental objectives, but in others it's missing. And I think the point that we want to make and why we look into this is that as the circular economy is part of the solution to some of the most urgent global challenges, such as climate change and loss of biodiversity, if we fail to integrate it, we're not only missing an opportunity, but we'd also risk achieving the set goals. And that's exactly why we, from a foundation point of view, look into this and support integration and pick up of the concept within those frameworks.
Just before we come to you, Jarkko, actually, we'll put this question to you from the audience. There's obviously circular economy standards being developed. I know there's ISO one. Question from Dr. Godson, IRO. How soon do you think the standard on circular economy will be completed and released by IFAC if the collaboration is ongoing, or indeed any circular economy standards?
Good question. For the ISO standards, I think the timeline is 3 years since the beginning of this year, if I remember correctly. So in another 2 years' time, the standards should be published if everything goes to plan. EMF, or the foundation, is an official liaison to that process. So we are plugged into the metrics working group within that standard. So we are staying close to that, and to some other efforts as well, what Michiel mentioned. The EU taxonomy, Michiel is, I don't know what the right term is, but an expert in the working group that is developing this taxonomy. We are in conversations with a lot of these organizations like CDP, and I think as an extension then, the International Business Council's report launched in September, if I remember correctly, in the extended indicators that cover the topic of circular economy, also refer to the work that the foundation has done on the topic. So we are finding our way to plug into some of these key initiatives in standardization generally, but then also for the non-financial accounting standards.
And is elements of circulytics or circular economy already integrated into any of these non-financial reporting standards?
Yeah, I think the closest for now is indeed the International Business Council's report, where the recommendation is to use either EMF's tools, or circulytics, or the World Business Council for Sustainable Development's circular transition indicators, depending on which suits the company's context better to measure the performance in that respect.
So if a company, or no, someone in the company in the audience was interested in getting started on circulytics now, what could they do now to do that?
Well, that's very easy. You essentially type in circulytics.com and sign up for an account. So it's a free tool to use for any company to get assessed, and plenty of resources on our website to help companies get started. It's a relatively low risk space, as it's the assessment is done in an environment that's just between EMF and the company, and the results also will not be published if the company does not wish to do so themselves. So it's I'd say low barrier of entry to the world of circular economy for a company to see where they stand today and where to go next.
And it's for all sizes of company? That's
right. So we've had everything from one-man startups to some of the biggest brands in the world doing the assessment. I think the questions are in a way optimized for larger companies, but it's being used successfully, I think, by very small organizations as well.
Great. So we actually have another question from the audience, which I can put to either of you. So one of the key challenges around with the circular economy is cost. Our current lifestyle is based around consume and dispose, and therefore the recovery and reuse of materials is not convenient, as it is not factored into the design of products and is therefore costly. How can consumers help drive the change in this existing process? So one of you want to pick it up? I guess it's one of the challenges of the linear economy is that placing a circular economy on top of the linear economy creates some challenges. So, Michiel, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yep. Happy to provide a few thoughts. So I think if we look at our current economy, it's still predominantly linear. And some of the negative externalities, such as air pollution, plastic pollution, or use of finite resources, is not, well, the cost of those externalities is currently not incorporated in the cost of products. And as a consumer, that then obviously makes it difficult because, well, it might come as a cost, or you simply don't have a choice. The habits or linear practices are truly embedded. If you're hungry and you want to buy a sandwich and you have to choose between a sandwich wrapped in single-use multi-layer plastic and another sandwich wrapped in multi-layer single-use plastic, well, if you're hungry, you're going to buy that sandwich either way. So I think from our point of view, it is a question of how can we change the system? And some of those barriers are indeed cost elements, and there are multiple ways to overcome them. Regulation is one, but I think another strong driver here is simply innovation. And think, for example, about fashion resale platforms or car sharing. In this case, yes, there's a story to be made about negative externalities and, for example, the waste that we produce in the fast fashion industry. But there's no need to go towards regulation. On this side, the business innovation and then the customers or the consumers here are driving the change already. And particularly in terms of resale of fashion, resale of textile, we see those platforms becoming very successfully, both from a financial point of view, but also from a material exchange point of view. So clothing being sold and bought by citizens directly. And that's simply because preferences are changing. We see millennials increasingly preferring access over ownership, or increasingly not turning their back to buying used clothing. So in that sense, I guess, as we're talking about system change, there will be different angles, and there will be a need for regulation to step in. But at the same time, there will be business coming up with new business models, new enabled by technology, or simply, well, new type of products, new design, and there will be changing preferences. And all those three drivers will and are already transforming industries. So I think as a consumer, if you do enjoy car sharing, you don't have to force yourself. Most likely it's going to be cheaper for you if you're not an avid user of a car. The platforms are there, the business models are there, so there's no additional demand. I think when it comes to slightly more nuanced discussions, typically I would assume as a citizen, you would also expect or would also prefer to buy a mobile phone for which you can repair the screen rather than one that you have to replace completely in case your screen breaks down. So there's a few elements there where sometimes the decision is a bit more nuanced, but overall the transition is shifting already systems, and as a citizen, you're part of that system. So we see that as an inevitable transition coming.
And thinking about that business innovation element, can you talk a little bit about how we work with businesses at the foundation, and particularly how we work with financial institutions such as BlackRock, who is a strategic partner of the foundation and obviously the world's largest asset manager, before we go on and talk about how the future activities of that we're going to do on finance and data and metrics.
Happy to. So talking about these new business models, they might require new ways of financing them. At the foundation, we've been working with a range of financial institutions in the past. One of them is, for example, BNP Paribas Leasing Solutions, where obviously the setup changes a little bit in terms of you as a final customer not owning the product, but actually having access to the product. And that's a characteristic that comes back quite often in circular business models. So that would be one element. But more broadly, we've been working together for quite a few years with our strategic partner Intesa Sanpaolo, which is a leading Italian bank. And as you mentioned, Emily, with BlackRock, which is the world's largest asset manager. As we do with all our strategic partners, and we've got a dozen of them, we want to support and challenge them on what the circular economy means to their core activities. So if we're working together with our strategic partner Renault, then obviously there's the relevance of remanufacturing engines, for example, or working together with Unilever and Danone. It's about their sourcing and regenerative agriculture, or it's about their packaging and how they think about reusing packaging or designing for recyclability. Now, when we're talking about BlackRock, obviously it is about asset management, it is about funds. And when we announced the partnership last year, BlackRock launched a public equity fund dedicated to the circular economy in collaboration with the MacArthur Foundation. So we support them there in terms of providing insights on what circular economy means across industries. And then obviously they can use those insights to inform their investment strategy and work on the fund. And I think we're very pleased to see how the fund, within a time span of just a year really, has reached over $1 billion assets under management, so over $1 billion assets under management. And for us, that's great to see, because that clearly sends a signal to other investors and corporates alike about the attractiveness of the circular economy as an investment theme. And that will help us not only within the real economy through the work we do with corporates, but also within the financial sector, bring the topic of circular economy higher on the agenda and really drive the transition. So yeah, very encouraging.
If I can actually add to both of those two questions, I think it's really important to emphasize what both of you have already mentioned about the role of design. A lot of the examples Michiel just gave are about design. It's about designing agricultural systems. It's about designing the right type of packaging. It's about designing the right type of system for delivering cars and manufacturing and remanufacturing parts. And so that design is really, I think, important for how foundation and generally we think about circular economy, and to make sure that there are no bad choices. You don't need to anymore choose between the plastic wrapped baguettes and the plastic wrapped baguette, but the baguette itself has been produced by a food system that is regenerative and it is circular and is packaged in material that is edible or is reusable. And that's really something we're aiming to when we work with our network of large companies that have really the power to shift the needle in their respective industries. And I think that's really the way that we think about it, and the way that companies think about it as well. Many of these have aspirations to be nature positive, and for the intrinsic sort of reason for that reason, turning their business models to be more circular, while of course in many instances also having a positive bottom line impact in doing so.
And we had another really great question from the audience, which is a circular economy an organizational effort or a multi-organizational one? Can an organization be self-sufficient in implementing a circular economy? Really great question.
Yeah, maybe I'll start briefly and hand it over to Michiel, who seems very excited to answer this one as well. But the short answer is no. I think it really is an effort that needs to be across, for example, the value chain from the first company that produces sort of feedstock all the way to the retail, where the whole system needs to move. We often talk about systemic transition. You need to make sure that all the materials that flow through that system are all circular. You can't have one link in that whole chain or a circle be circular alone. And so that's why it's a lot about collaboration, and the few hundred companies in our network, that's exactly what we try to do with these companies, to create a network of companies that can together change entire systems to transition to a circular economy.
Yeah. Thank you, Jarkko. And I wanted to add a few thoughts. Indeed, this is about system change. I want to give an example from the plastic packaging value chain, which is an industry, a sector we've been working quite a lot with at the foundation. If you think about changing upstream, for example, investing in designing your packaging such that it can be reused or recycled more easily, but you're not adjusting downstream, so there's no system in place to actually collect and reuse or collect and recycle, then all those investments upstream, they won't give the necessary return And the other way around, if you're investing in perfect high quality recycling technology, but the design of the packaging isn't adjusted and isn't aligned with your technology, then you might get rubbish in, and well, despite of your high quality recycling technology, you're not going to get to the quality, high quality recycled material. Hence, again, the investment is not delivering the return that it could be delivering. So the solution here really is to work together across the value chain and understand how you can lift an entire sector. And what you see, for example, in plastics is that some of the plastic producers now are vertically integrating and buying recycling companies, because I understand that in order to close the loop, if you want to move away from finite resources for various reasons, including climate change, but also volatility, price volatility, for example, then integrating vertically and understanding how you can really be part of closing that loop is something that's high on the agenda. And as Jarkko said, you still need the entire chain. You can't do this by yourself, but understanding your role and actively taking part in that transition is what we work with companies and what distinguishes leaders among the pack.
Great, thanks, Michiel. So now let's look towards the future. How will the foundation continue working with the financial sector and on data and metrics for circular economy? Michiel, do you want to start?
Yep, happy to. So, well, first of all, we mentioned it already a few times. At the foundation, we work together with leading decision makers, policymakers, and business. From a finance initiative point of view, we continue to work with our close partners, BlackRock and Intesa Sanpaolo. I already explained what we do together with BlackRock. The fund is one of those elements. We also work together with Intesa Sanpaolo. They recently announced how they're going to increase their credit facility to 6 billion euros in order to support circular companies. So that's great to see, and that's one of those elements we work with with those companies. That's the first bit. Second bit is those initiatives, disclosure, non-financial reporting, regulatory efforts that we see out there, and how we can inform those initiatives, helping to integrate the circular economy. The EU taxonomy is a great example. Jarkko already mentioned how the MacArthur Foundation is a member of the Platform on Sustainable Finance, and how we are bringing our expertise to that platform. And then thirdly, it's about promoting the concept. We're very glad to see leading institutions talking about the circular economy, launching products and services dedicated to the circular economy. But we still believe it's worth spreading the word and raising the profile, showing and explaining to financial institutions across the finance sector how the circular economy is a massive opportunity and how they can start seizing that opportunity today.
Yep. And just to add to that, I think one thing we're doing to sort of earn our seat at these tables where we talk about non-financial measuring and reporting standards as an example is to keep developing our knowledge and circularity as a tool to measure circular economy performance for companies and keep it at sort of the cutting edge of what it means to be a circular company and how to measure that. And we'll continue developing that tool to make sure that we bring the right insights into these broader discussions as well.
Great. And just before close out, I want to sneak one last question in from the audience. So, Michiel, lifting an entire sector seems daunting, which I think is fair to say. How do all of these companies see short-term wins to help them commit and prioritize a long-term strategy with many partners and politics?
Yeah, great question indeed. And again, I want to tap into the plastics example, given that it's our work within that sector is quite mature, and also given that plastics is high on the agenda. So if you think about that plastic value chain, you start upstream with petchem companies, resin producers, packaging producers. You've got your large FMCG, so fast-moving consumer goods companies like a Unilever, Danone, Nestle. And then you go further downstream, retailers, and then collection, sorting, and recycling. Think about a Veolia or a Suez. So how to ensure that you can align those companies and move towards the same direction? So first of all, there's a question of understanding why the current system isn't working and what the vision is of a future system. I think in the case of plastics, that case for change has become quite clear for many reasons. Either you might be worried about plastic pollution, or you might be worried about regulation that actually is responding to pressure from the public in order to do something about that plastic pollution. Or you might be worried about your competitors who are coming up with innovation and clear business drivers to address this. So there's again a few angles that would drive change. And then once you go a little bit deeper, you understand how, for example, large, fast-moving consumer goods companies are making bold public commitments because they have to respond to their customers who are worried about a certain package ending up on a beach or to be found somewhere in the forest. So what you see is that they are making bold commitments towards this long-term strategy. They often have the scale and the reach and have to think longer term. Now, if you're further upstream and you're a supplier, you might be smaller or you might have less longer-term strategies. But at the same time, you also simply have to respond to demand coming from your clients. So if those FMCGs are making bold commitments, and if you want to respond to that demand, you change the way you go about your business. And similarly, you get an upstream effect, like a snowball effect, as well as downstream. If you're a packaging producer and you want to use recycled content because the FMCG has made a bold public commitment, then you'll have to source that recycled content, which then impacts further downstream the recyclers in order to get high quality recycled content. So what you see is that you get a mix of longer term incentives in terms of really shifting that system and moving the needle, again, because of different pressure, whether that's regulation, whether that's citizens, or whether that's business innovation. And you mix it with short-term, very concrete incentives, because there's demand for recycled content, because there's a clear demand for new business models, new delivery models, reuse, and you simply want to respond in the market, want to respond to that demand.
Thank you, Michiel, and thank you, Jarko, for all of that interesting insights we've had during the last 45 minutes. So for those of you who are interested in finding out more about how circular your company is now and areas to focus on for the future, Circulytics is open for your company to do, as Jarko said, and you can register for an account for free on our website, which is emf.org, to benefit from insights generated through the assessment. Our finance paper is also on our website and gives an overview of what's going on in the financial services sector in terms of circular economy financing activity, as well as opportunities, why circular economy is an opportunity for the finance sector, and what circular economy looks like across key sectors with many examples. We've also recently published a series of policy and investment and insight papers looking at how the circular economy offers opportunities for new and better growth in the recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. And they also talk about how the circular economy approach can reduce the likelihood of future shocks and increase resilience within the industry, which is also valuable beyond the current situation. So those papers cover 5 industries, and those are the built environment, mobility, plastic packaging, fashion and food. Our website also has a wealth of information on it, on circular economy across all sectors, from really in-depth reports to inspiring videos telling the story of how circular economy transition is playing out on the ground. All of the links to the resources I've just mentioned are in the chat box now, so make sure you copy and paste them if you want them into something else. And finally, we really hope that you enjoyed the session today, and thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to continue to engage with many of you and the important work of His Royal Highness and A4S into 2021 and beyond.